Morning all. I thought it would be nice to have a look at a great game played by Gawain Jones, who, okay, he didn't do statistically that well in the recent London Classic, but he'd never played against such strong opponents before in his life. So it was actually a great privilege and honour, I think, and great experience for him to play in the London Chess Classic, just gone. And he has played some brilliant games in the past. Even back in 2007, there was a brilliant game he played against Loek van Wely, a Dutch grandmaster, a very strong Dutch grandmaster. At the time of this game, Loek van Wely was 2679, so nearly 2700. Gawain Jones was 2526. Let's see this game. Another thing, by the way, Gawain is a fan of the Grand Prix attack, which in many of my Warzone videos I'm using the Grand Prix attack. So it's interesting to see a game with this against a near 2700 opponent. So Knight C3 here discourages black from playing an early D5, and the intention is revealed that it's not going to be a closed Sicilian with G3, but rather F4. As Gawain has explained in his videos, if you play the immediate F4, then black has D5, and black has equality usually, or even better. So Knight C3 against black playing D5, and now F4, the Grand Prix attack system here. G6 seems very, very logical for black to eye that D4 square. Okay, Knight F3, Bishop G7. And we see the move in this position, Bishop B5. Okay, with Bishop B5, structural damage might be threatened. Against Bishop C4, it might be easy for black to play for D5 still with E6, Knight G7, then D5 later. So sometimes Bishop B5 is a nice alternative to putting the bishop on C4, as is the case maybe here. Black plays Knight D4, and the bishop refuses to move actually, just white castles kingside. And you might think that's a bit strange for black, for example, not to be able to just take here with getting that bishop pair, but it's getting rid of one of white's worst pieces really, because if this bishop's not a target, it's off the board, then white can continue maybe with later D3 and then standard attacking moves. The bishop is still harassed in this position with A6, and it goes actually here instead of C4, which it can be harassed say with B5, it goes actually to D3 in this particular position. Okay, did black just gain a tempo putting the knight on a strong square? We see now B5, and black's preparing a double fianchetto. It all seems fairly logical from black's point of view at the moment. White takes on D4, bishop takes D4 check, king H1. And now we see the move Bishop B7. Okay, but black's development, if you look at black's development, the king's still in the centre, this knight hasn't moved yet. And in fact the natural square F6 is now taken away from the knight with the move E5. So is the knight going to do something else? Is it going to try and come to F5? On E6 there might be the use of the E4 square, and in fact here it's evident already, in fact, that white might be preparing bishop E4 or knight E4, and E6 might make that worse. Black instead plays a curious move in this position, Rook A7. Okay, and after bishop E4, this is a very interesting position. Black doesn't perhaps want to take on E4. That knight on E4 is very useful against E6 for the knight to pounce on D6. Black actually eliminates the knight on C3 here, leaving the bishop loose, and actually winning a pawn basically, because after bishop takes B7, playing now bishop takes B2, attacking the rook. So has black nabbed a pawn? Gawain just takes on B2, rook takes B7. Well, it's not so clear cut. This bishop obviously looks like a menace on the diagonal for E6, attacking the rook on H8. But here actually Gawain chooses F5, and that's also equally aggressive move, and it seems this is really, really dangerous. There's a loose piece here as well to go in a tempo on if needed, so that could target both f7 and b7 potentially. Black plays in this position the move knight h6, and now we see queen f3 gaining a tempo. For the moment f7 is guarded by that knight, and is the knight going to potentially come to f5? Well, the rook's now protected, and we see now another forcing move e6 attacking the rook here. And Loek van Wely plays f6. Okay, and now we see f takes g6, and it is very dangerous, of course, for g7 now and queen h5. So that can't be ignored, taking this pawn, it would seem. Although knight f7 there, well, we'll check that out in detail in the second pass. But it seems intuitively maybe just taking queen h5 and then reserving that g7 is even stronger, actually. So black takes on g6, and now a great move here. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, Gawain plays bishop takes f6. And you might think, well, okay, what about, say, rook f8 going to pin that bishop? Well, possibly white has a strong move in this position, like e takes d7 or queen f4, just counter-attacking on the knight. We'll get into the nitty-gritty in the second pass of this position, but black decided to just take that bishop, and allowing queen takes f6. Now after rook g8, white just puts the other rook to the centre, rook a e1, threatening all sorts of nasties. d5 now, and now we see just a piece down, but queen g5, and it's very, very difficult for the black king in the centre, and this knight is vulnerable again. And on knight f5, there's rook takes f5 if needed, just to use that pin. So the knight seems doomed here. Black plays rook e7. Okay. And now we see queen takes h6. So what is going on here? Why can't black, for example, take on e6 in this position, you might ask? That's something to check in the second pass of this game. Okay, black actually plays queen a5, so potentially nabbing d2 if needed. We see rook f6, but also a2 is vulnerable. Isn't this a bit too greedy? The queen looks a bit too materialistic here. Rook takes g6, rook f8, and now can you see the next move really punishing black? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, queen takes f8, and black is forced to resign. It looks like rook f1 and rook g8 is going to be devastating, but there's also rook f7 to factor in. Let's check this game technically. So rook f1 check is a forced mate. So if king e8, we have rook g8 mate. That pawn's a nice mate in that. And if rook f7, then we can make like this: rook takes f7 and rook g8 as one way. Okay, so what was going on in this cute little game? Let's have a look from the start. So, from an engine point of view, it's interesting. Bishop b5 and bishop c4 are both being considered, and slightly more weight at this depth is given to bishop b5 here, curiously. Okay, so bishop b5. and we see knight d4. Perhaps not the best move technically, who knows. Bishop c4 is not needed, pardon me. Black, rather white, just castles. And the engine likes actually knight takes b5 here, as well as a6. What's actually going on? If for those interested, knight takes, say d6. Let's follow this. Queen e2, knight gets kicked. In this position, without that light square bishop, has the punch been taken out of white's attack? There's no harassment with the d4 square. I think that's a key thing. With this removal of the knight here, knight on d4, that's kind of pressure on d4 is gone. So white can relax a little bit more, maybe, in this position. But it seems to be about equal, but okay. So anyway, after castles we see a6, and the bishop comes back to d3 here. So black now plays b5, and this might be a little mistake actually. b5, you see this engine evaluation going up quite significantly for white. Eventually the move e5, which wasn't played, but there might be some tactical vulnerabilities to do with this move, and it's still the king's still in the centre. One more move, so interesting position. Well, maybe e5 is also interesting as well as what was played, with the idea of a4. It seems to try and use that a file later. So knight takes d4, bishop takes d4. We see king h1, bishop takes d4 check, bishop b7, e5. Now this curious looking move, rook a7, bishop e4, and the engine doesn't mind losing a pawn here either. There's very good compensation. So bishop takes c3, bishop takes b7, bishop takes b2, nabbing a pawn. Okay, so in this position, f5 looks like a very, very dangerous position for black intuitively already. Knight h6, queen f3 hitting the rook, queen b6, e6 hitting the other rook. Okay, f6. So we see f takes g6, and let's check this out of interest. What is the crushing move on d takes e6, for example? It appears g7. Okay, let's check this out. Rook g8 check. Now on knight f7, I think, yeah, simply queen takes h7 and the rook is defenseless. So that's that mystery solved. It's not about winning knight or anything. It's about this pawn on g7 and this loose rook on g8. So this would be a disaster, this position, g7, disaster for black. Okay, so hg seems mandatory here. Now this move, bishop takes f6, so the second little mystery from the first pass through the game. On rook f8, what would happen on rook f8? A natural idea of pinning that bishop. Let's see, queen g3 is mentioned here, eyeing g6, so let's have a look. Rook takes, e takes, queen takes g6 check, and in this position no rush to take on h6 because e takes d7 here threatens queen e8 and then queening the pawn, so time to take that pawn, and now the knight can be taken with advantage. If actually that's a very important move, I think. If we took care that, I think there's nothing, or not as much anyway, hardly as much. So that's why maybe rook f8. There's queen g3 here. Okay, so we see in the game e takes f6 being played. Now visually it looks fantastic for white, but he is a knight down at the moment. Rook a e1, huge threats. Can't allow surely e takes d7. Get mating net going there. just to demonstrate that. Say a5, I think some sort of forced mate like this, or winning material. I thought rook e7, but queen e7. Let's go with this. Well, queen d8, rook e8 winning material. That can't be allowed. So d5 from black. Now let's move queen g5. It's the strongest move of the position according to our engine Houdini here. Queen g5. So it doesn't matter about knight f5. Surely just rook takes f5, and white persists with a huge position. So getting that knight back. Now if the knight's trying to be defended, then surely just well, let's see how many ways of defending the knight. Rook h7. Interesting. Rook f7 here, very interesting position, this one. Threatening mate on the spot. Let's go with, say, knight takes f7. Then this is a mate in 4. E takes. If takes here, then mate in 1. If here, then queen e7. Then queening. End of game after queen d8. So that's pretty dismal after rook f7. On rook takes f7, again, it's pretty dismal. Okay, so what to do about queen g5? Very powerful move. If rook h8, then just taking here. In this position, okay, e7 seems the very strongest. If the rook takes, then queen takes b6. Otherwise, queening here, just winning a rook. Very nice indeed. And the queen is protecting that queen against queen takes g6. So crashing through there as well. So this queen g5 is one of the star moves of the game, really. A piece down, but queen g5 with the black king in the centre. Black's defenceless, it seems. This poor knight stranded on h6. So we see rook e7 in the game. Queen takes h6. Okay. The other alternative, well, in this position rather, we were wondering in the first pass about rook takes e6 here. What happens on rook takes e6? Okay. Great move here. Great move, it seems. There's a very outstanding move in this position. Queen h7. Of course, once you see it, it's easy. Because now if rook takes e1, well, we can take on g8 and then take the rook, so that's no good. So the rook, where does it move to? If it goes to f8. Now here, queen takes g6 using that pin. This is all getting a bit nasty. Queen g7. Queen takes f8. Black's just losing a rook, basically. So that little silent move, like killer. Queen h7 here. If that pawn was taken there, it seems black's totally overloaded in this position. So rook f8, queen takes g6. Lovely. With the king in the centre, these things are possible. These effects, special effects. So queen a5 is in a desperate position. It looks to be a terrible position. If black tried queen d6 instead, white could still build up pressure on f8 with rook f6. Maybe just take here, and it still looks very good for white. But black went on an expedition with the queen here, like a computer from the 1970s, trying to win material, neglecting king safety. But king safety was already pretty dire in any case. So making the game quite amusing with queen takes a2, rook takes g6, and a nice little finish testing the forcing move calculations of Gawain with queen takes f8. Okay, and here, end of game. Hope you enjoyed that one. great game there from Gawain, and you know, maybe there's some other brilliant games in this opening system which makes them maybe particularly interesting to check out in this Grand Prix attack system. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.